Hello and welcome. The chest before you gleams with promise. Gold trim catches torchlight, brass hinges appear untouched by rust, and the wood grain itself seems to whisper of treasures within. Your hand extends toward the latch, fingers trembling with anticipation. But something stops you. Perhaps a subtle wrongness in the way shadows fall across its surface. Perhaps the faint smell of acid in the air. Perhaps simply the memory of a story told in a tavern long ago. A warning passed down through generations of adventurers who learned too late that not every treasure chest is what it seems. The Mimic stands as one of the most feared creatures in all the realms. A predator so perfectly adapted to dungeon life that its very existence has changed how adventurers approach the simplest act of opening a door or claiming treasure. These shape-shifting horrors have haunted the dark places of the world for over a millennium, turning the promise of gold into a death sentence for the unwary. You find yourself now descending into the depths of their mystery, peeling back layers of legend and truth to understand the creature that has made paranoia a survival skill. Mimics are classified in the modern understanding as monstrosities, creatures whose forms have been shaped by magic into something unnatural. Yet they possess qualities that blur the boundaries between categories. 3 competing theories exist regarding their origin, and each carries its own weight of evidence and scholarly debate. The first and most widely accepted theory, documented in numerous texts and considered canon by most sages, suggests that mimics were deliberately created by wizards, paranoid archmages, seeking the ultimate security for their treasure hoards. This explanation appears in the earliest documented texts about these creatures, describing how ancient magic users needed guardians that required no payment, no loyalty spells, and no complicated instructions. A mimic simply waited, patient as stone, until someone touched it. Then it fed. The language spoken by common mimics supports this wizard origin theory. Their speech patterns represent a corrupted, degraded form of the original languages spoken by their supposed creators. Over generations, as mimics reproduced and spread throughout the world, the words twisted and changed, much like how a message whispered through 100 mouths becomes unrecognizable. Yet traces of ancient arcane dialects remain, suggesting these creatures once understood the commands of their masters. But not all scholars agree with this tidy explanation. A second theory, less documented but whispered in libraries and discussed in hushed tones by plainer researchers, suggests that mimics might have connections to the far realm. This could help explain certain disturbing qualities about them. Their amorphous true forms, their ability to reshape flesh and bone at will, their predatory patience that seems almost unnatural in its duration. However, this theory lacks the historical documentation of the wizard creation origin and remains largely speculative. A third possibility exists, though few dare speak it aloud. The Lick Thessaler, an undead spellcaster of tremendous power who dwells in the wormcrawl fissure of Greyhawk, claims to have created the first mimic. Thessalar the Transmuter achieved lictum centuries ago, binding his soul to eternal unlife so that his experiments could continue indefinitely. Death cannot claim him, and time cannot stop his work. His research focuses on transmutation magic and alchemical experimentation, using his own magically enhanced blood as the foundation for creating new forms of life. According to fragments of his journals recovered from abandoned laboratories, Thessalar takes credit for numerous infamous monsters, including mimics and rust monsters. Whether this claim represents truth or the mad boasting of an undead ego remains uncertain. But the Lick has certainly demonstrated the capability to create life where none should exist. Understanding what a mimic truly is requires looking past the forms it assumes and examining the creature beneath. In its natural state, a mimic appears as an amorphous mass, a blob of grayish-brown flesh without definite shape or structure. This formless body possesses an almost liquid quality, able to flow and reshape itself with disturbing ease. The texture resembles raw clay mixed with something organic, something that pulses with a heartbeat you can feel through your boots if you stand too close. The mimic's shape-changing ability functions as a polymorph effect, allowing the creature to transform its entire physical structure into any object of appropriate size. During this transformation, the mimic's statistics remain unchanged regardless of what form it takes. A mimic disguised as a treasure chest possesses the same strength, durability, and offensive capability as one pretending to be a door or a stone statue. This consistency makes them remarkably adaptable predators, able to adjust their hunting strategy to match their environment without sacrificing combat effectiveness. The transformation itself is complete enough to fool most casual observation. Mimics can alter their pigmentation to match various materials: the gray-white of marble, the deep brown of aged oak, the bright gleam of gold, silver, or copper. They can texture their surface to replicate wood grain, stone veining, or the smooth polish of worked metal. Small details emerge during the change: hinges on a chest, door handles, the individual stones in a wall, even the weathering and wear patterns that make an object look appropriately aged. You could stand inches away from a mimic and see nothing wrong, nothing to alert you to the danger. But the transformation has limitations. A mimic cannot reduce its mass during shape-changing, only redistribute it. A creature weighing 300 pounds must become an object weighing 300 pounds, though it can radically alter its dimensions to achieve different configurations. This restriction means mimics cannot disguise themselves as small objects if they have grown large, nor can they effectively mimic items that should weigh more than their actual body mass. An experienced adventurer might notice this inconsistency: a golden throne that shifts slightly when bumped, or a treasure chest that seems too light when lifted. The mimic's most dangerous feature, however, is its adhesive. When in object form, the creature's surface secretes a powerful natural glue that adheres to anything that touches it. This sticky coating works on skin, cloth, leather, metal, wood, and virtually any other material. Once contact is made, pulling free requires tremendous strength and effort. The escape proves even more difficult because the adhesive creates a grapple effect, with attempts to break free facing significant challenges. Beneath the adhesive layer lie pseudopods, muscular appendages the mimic uses for locomotion and attack. These limbs emerge from the creature's mass when needed, extending outward to strike or grab. Each pseudopod possesses considerable strength, capable of delivering bludgeoning blows that crack bones and rupture organs. The mimic can form multiple pseudopods simultaneously, allowing it to grapple one victim while attacking another, or to beat an armed opponent who attempts to rescue a stuck companion. The creature's mouth represents perhaps its most horrifying feature. Hidden within the transformed shape, this orifice remains concealed until the moment of attack. Then it opens, revealing rows of teeth designed not for chewing, but for tearing and crushing. The bite attack carries additional danger beyond mere physical trauma. Mimics can produce acid that begins dissolving flesh, serving both as a weapon and the start of the feeding process. Mimics perceive their environment through dark vision, able to see in complete darkness up to 60 feet. This sensory adaptation makes perfect sense for a creature that dwells primarily in dungeons, caves, and other lightless spaces. They do not rely on heat detection or movement sensing like some predators, but rather possess true vision that works in the absence of light. This means a mimic can distinguish colors, recognize faces, and identify specific objects, even in pitch blackness. The creature's intelligence varies significantly between individuals, but most mimics possess at least animal cunning. Common mimics, the variety most frequently encountered, demonstrate limited intelligence, with cognitive abilities below average human levels. They understand cause and effect, can learn from experience, and show capacity for basic planning. This level of intelligence allows mimics to choose ambush locations strategically, to recognize when prey appears too dangerous to attack, and to remember which tactics succeeded in previous hunts. Greater mimics, rarer and more dangerous cousins to the common variety, possess significantly higher intelligence. Some specimens demonstrate cognitive abilities that approach or match human levels, with wisdom and cunning accumulated over long periods of existence. These elder creatures can speak common and engage in actual conversation with potential prey. Based on documented encounters, this suggests the oldest mimics may develop what approaches true sapience, complete with personality and preferences beyond simple survival. This intelligence creates an unexpected possibility: negotiation. A mimic that speaks common might be reasoned with, bribed, or convinced to share information. Some adventurers have reported successfully parleying with mimics, offering food in exchange for safe passage or knowledge about the surrounding area. Based on what we know about mimic behavior, a well-fed mimic could prove surprisingly cooperative, willing to describe what it has observed from its stationary hiding place. After all, a creature that spends weeks or months disguised as furniture in a single room witnesses many things: conversations, arguments, secret dealings, and the comings and goings of various inhabitants. But trusting a mimic remains dangerous. These are predators first and foremost, driven by hunger that gnaws at them constantly. Even an intelligent mimic that seems friendly and cooperative may be calculating odds, measuring risk versus reward. This could imply it wonders whether the offered food equals the meal you would make, whether your companions would pursue it if it killed you, whether the information it possesses is valuable enough to keep you alive. Every interaction with a mimic likely involves this predatory calculus, a cold assessment of whether cooperation or violence serves its interests better in this specific moment. At its core, a mimic exists to feed. Everything else about the creature, its shape-shifting, its patience, its intelligence, serves this single fundamental purpose. Understanding mimic behavior requires understanding the constant, gnawing hunger that motivates every decision these creatures make. A single satisfying meal can sustain a mimic for weeks, allowing it to remain motionless in the same disguise for extended periods. This remarkable metabolic efficiency makes mimics ideally suited for ambush predation. They do not need to hunt actively or range widely in search of food. Instead, they find a location where prey regularly passes, assume an appropriate disguise, and wait. Days might pass, or even weeks, before someone touches the false door or reaches for the fake treasure. The mimic simply exists, patient as stone, confident that eventually hunger will draw someone within reach. But when the time between meals stretches too long, desperation sets in. This could suggest a starving mimic becomes increasingly willing to take risks, to attack prey that might prove dangerous, to break cover early if it means securing food. For the mimic, failure to feed means not just discomfort, but death. A slow, agonizing death by starvation that overrides all caution. This desperation makes weakened mimics unpredictable and especially dangerous, like wounded animals backed into corners. Section 2. The many forms of mimicry. The treasure chest remains the most iconic form a mimic assumes, burned into the collective memory of every adventurer who has descended into a dungeon. You have seen this scene painted on tavern walls, described in cautionary tales, and enacted in theatrical productions. The unwary rogue reaching for promised gold, only to find teeth and acid instead of coins. This classic image holds such power because it represents a fundamental betrayal of expectation. the transformation of desire into death, but focusing solely on treasure chests blinds you to the true scope of mimic adaptability. The countless other forms these creatures employ in their endless hunt for prey. The common mimic, the variety you are most likely to encounter, can assume the shape of any object roughly matching its body mass. Most specimens weigh between 200 and 450 pounds in their natural form, giving them considerable flexibility in choosing disguises. They favor objects that invite interaction, items that creatures naturally touch or open without suspicious inspection. A door represents an excellent choice because every creature passing through a dungeon must eventually open doors. The mimic positions itself in a corridor or chamber entrance, perfectly mimicking the wood grain, iron bands, and door handle of a typical portal. When you grasp the handle and push, the adhesive catches your palm, and the door pushes back, wrapping around you in a crushing embrace. Chairs and benches make equally effective disguises, especially in areas where adventurers might rest. After hours of exploration, combat, and trap dodging, even cautious parties eventually need to sit to catch their breath and tend their wounds. A comfortable-looking chair in an otherwise empty room seems like a blessing, a momentary respite from danger. You lower yourself onto the seat, and only then do you realize your mistake as the chair folds up around you, trapping you in a cocoon of adhesive flesh. Your companions watch in horror as what they thought was furniture begins to digest their friend. Statues and sculptures provide another common disguise, particularly in dungeons with any pretense of architectural grandeur. Ancient temples, noble crypts, and wizard towers often feature decorative stonework, guardian statues flanking doorways, busts of forgotten heroes, or abstract sculptures meant to impress visitors. A mimic can position itself among these legitimate artworks, distinguishable only by subtle signs that few notice until too late. Perhaps the statue's base seems slightly unstable, or its weight distribution appears wrong for solid stone. Perhaps it stands in a location that makes no aesthetic sense, placed there by the mimic rather than a designer. You might brush against it accidentally in a narrow corridor, or lean against it while examining a wall, and suddenly find yourself adhered to what you thought was harmless decoration. Rugs and carpets represent a more ambitious transformation, requiring the mimic to flatten its entire body into a two-dimensional surface. This disguise works best in furnished dungeons, places where decorative elements make sense within the context. You enter a room that appears lived in, maybe even comfortable, with tapestries on walls and a rich carpet covering the stone floor. The carpet's patterns are intricate, its colors deep and inviting. You step onto it without thinking, your attention focused on the doors ahead or the furniture around you. The moment your boot touches down, the carpet erupts upward, wrapping around your legs and pulling you off balance. Before you can react, you find yourself cocooned in what used to be floor covering, unable to run or even stand as the mimic begins its work. Weapon racks and armor stands attract a specific type of victim: the greedy or practical adventurer looking to upgrade equipment. A dungeon chamber might contain a rack of well-maintained weapons, swords and axes gleaming in torchlight, apparently abandoned by previous occupants. The sensible part of your mind questions why weapons would be left here, why they show no rust or neglect. But the temptation proves too strong, especially if your own blade has grown dull or your armor has taken damage. You reach for a sword, and the entire rack springs to life, pseudopods erupting from what seemed like wooden framework. The weapons, of course, are part of the mimic's body, texture and shape, rather than separate objects. Books and tomes offer particularly insidious disguises, preying on the scholarly instincts of wizards and learned adventurers. A library or study might contain hundreds of legitimate books, making it nearly impossible to identify which volume is actually a predator. The mimic book sits on a shelf among its fellows, spine decorated with title and author, pages visible if you tilt your head to look. When you pull it from the shelf, perhaps seeking specific knowledge or magical formulae, the adhesive catches your fingers and the book opens wide, far wider than any book should open, revealing a mouth within its pages. The other books on the shelf remain untouched, innocent volumes witnessing your struggle as the mimic drags you against the bookshelf, using the furniture as leverage while it feeds. But these examples only scratch the surface of mimic versatility. In urban environments, mimics have been discovered disguised as street lamps, rain barrels, market stalls, and even portions of cobblestone street. One documented case in Waterdeep described a mimic that spent 3 years disguised as a public bench in a busy plaza, periodically consuming homeless people and drunks who sat down at night. The disappearances were attributed to crime or misadventure, until a wizard happened to cast Detect Magic while passing by, revealing the aberrant aura of the creature. In natural settings, mimics can imitate rocks, logs, mushroom clusters, or even small structures like hunting blinds or shepherd huts. Their limitation comes not from imagination, but from mass, size, and the need to remain in locations where prey regularly appears. Greater mimics transcend these basic forms, demonstrating shape-shifting abilities that border on the impossible. These elder specimens, some of which have survived for centuries, grow far larger than their common cousins. Based on documented encounters, a greater mimic might weigh several tons, allowing it to assume truly massive forms. Entire buildings, ships, or even small structures like guard towers or bridge sections. The house mimic represents the ultimate expression of this ability. A creature so large that it can disguise itself as a complete dwelling. You might encounter a house mimic in several contexts. Sometimes they appear in wilderness settings, a cottage or cabin standing alone in the forest, mysteriously well-maintained despite its isolated location. The building looks inviting, offering shelter from weather and predators. You open the door and step inside, finding furnished rooms, a hearth, even supplies in the pantry. Everything appears normal until you try to leave and discover the door no longer opens, or opens into a space that should not exist, or leads back into the same room you just left. This could imply the house itself has become a maze, its interior geography controlled by the mimic, corridors stretching and rooms rearranging as the creature herds you deeper into its body. Other house mimics could integrate themselves into existing settlements, replacing legitimate buildings through slow growth and careful positioning. A structure in a town's poor quarter might stand empty for years, considered haunted or cursed by locals who avoid it. In reality, a mimic has taken up residence, consuming occasional vagrants or curious children while maintaining the appearance of an abandoned house. Based on what we know about mimic behavior patterns, these urban mimics likely show remarkable patience, sometimes going months between meals to avoid attracting official attention. They understand that too many disappearances will bring investigators, guards, or adventurers, threats that even a powerful mimic would prefer to avoid. Ship mimics exist as well, though they remain vanishingly rare. These maritime variants disguise themselves as derelict vessels, ghost ships floating abandoned on calm seas. Salvagers who come aboard expecting to claim valuable cargo instead find themselves trapped as the ship suddenly comes alive. Hatches sealing and planks adhering to boots. Based on the mimic's shape-shifting capabilities, the mimic ship could actually sail, using its shape-shifting ability to manipulate sails and rudder, allowing it to position itself in shipping lanes where new prey regularly appears. Historical records describe a mimic ship that haunted the trade routes near the Moonshee Isles for over a decade before finally being destroyed by a coalition of merchant captains who set it ablaze with alchemical fire. The variety of mimic forms extends to more specialized environmental adaptations as well. In fungal forests and the Underdark, mimics disguise themselves as giant mushrooms, their caps and stalks nearly indistinguishable from the legitimate fungi surrounding them. Dark elf cities have reported mimics taking the form of slave cages, weapon racks, or even portions of spider silk rope bridges. In the Nine Hells and other planar locations, this could suggest mimics adapt to local expectations, becoming torture devices, soul cages, or hellish furniture that fits the environment. Each habitat presents unique opportunities and challenges, and mimics evolve their strategies accordingly. Regional variations in mimic behavior and preferred forms have been documented across Faerun. Based on observed patterns, mimics in the cold northern regions often disguise themselves as campfire logs or firewood stacks, likely because they recognize that freezing adventurers will desperately gather anything that might burn. Desert mimics take the form of water barrels or oasis vegetation, targeting dehydrated travelers whose desperation overrides caution. Swamp mimics become hollow logs, rafts, or wooden platforms, preying on creatures trying to navigate treacherous wetlands. In each case, the mimic identifies what its prey needs most and becomes that thing, turning necessity into a death trap. Some mimics develop what can only be called signature styles, preferred forms they return to repeatedly across their hunting career. An intelligent mimic might spend decades perfecting its treasury disguise, learning exactly how to arrange itself to trigger greed while suppressing suspicion. Another might specialize in doorways, studying how real doors look and sound and feel until its imitation becomes flawless. These specialist mimics often achieve remarkable success rates because they understand their chosen disguise so thoroughly. They know which details matter and which do not, where adventurers look and what they overlook, how to position themselves for maximum effectiveness. The question of why mimics choose specific forms over others reveals much about their psychology. Intelligent mimics make deliberate, calculated decisions about their disguises based on environmental analysis and prey behavior prediction. They observe traffic patterns in dungeons, noting which rooms receive the most visitors and which objects get touched most frequently. Based on their demonstrated intelligence, a mimic might spend days in its natural form, hiding in shadows and watching before committing to a particular disguise. This research phase allows it to maximize success probability, ensuring that when it finally assumes a form, that form will attract prey efficiently. Less intelligent mimics rely more on instinct and trial and error learning. They try various disguises, remember which ones resulted in feeding, and repeat successful patterns. A young mimic might start by imitating whatever object sits nearest to it when it first feels hungry. If that choice works, producing a meal, the mimic will likely use similar disguises in the future. If it fails, the mimic tries something different, gradually developing a repertoire of effective forms through experience. This learning process can take years, and many young mimics starve before discovering reliable strategies. Cooperation between mimics occurs rarely, but produces devastating results when it does. Two or more mimics working together can create elaborate traps that no single creature could manage. One mimic becomes a treasure chest, while another takes the form of the floor beneath it. You approach the chest, weapons ready and paranoia high, checking it carefully for mimics. Satisfied that the chest is real, you reach for it, never suspecting that the floor itself is alive. The floor mimic grabs your legs while the chest mimic lunges forward, and suddenly you face two predators simultaneously, their adhesive and pseudopods working in concert to overwhelm you. Such partnerships seem to form opportunistically rather than through social bonding. Two mimics might end up hunting in the same area, and discover that cooperation increases their individual success rates. They do not communicate beyond simple positioning, each taking a form that complements the other. The arrangement continues as long as both mimics benefit, but either will abandon the partnership immediately if it proves disadvantageous. Mimics lack the social instincts that create true cooperation. Working together, only when doing so serves their selfish feeding interests. The diversity of mimic forms means you can never truly relax in any dungeon or hostile environment. Every object becomes suspect, every surface potentially dangerous. This constant vigilance exhausts adventuring parties, wearing down their attention and caution over hours of exploration. Eventually, fatigue sets in, and that moment of lowered guard, that single instant when you forget to check something carefully, becomes the moment a mimic strikes. They are patient enough to wait for your exhaustion, calculating enough to recognize when your vigilance fails, and fast enough to exploit the opportunity before you can recover. Section 3. The hunt, tactics, behavior, and feeding. The mimic's approach to hunting reveals a sophistication that belies its monstrous nature. You might expect a creature of such alien origins to hunt mindlessly, attacking anything that comes near with animal fury. But observation tells a different story, one of careful calculation and strategic patience that rivals the most cunning predators in nature. Every decision a mimic makes, from where it positions itself to which form it assumes to when it finally strikes, reflects an understanding of prey behavior that develops over years or even centuries of experience. The hunt begins long before you enter the room. Based on their demonstrated intelligence, an intelligent mimic likely scouts its territory extensively, moving through corridors and chambers in its natural form under cover of darkness. It notes the layout of each space, identifies choke points and high traffic areas, observes which rooms contain valuables that might attract treasure seekers. This reconnaissance phase can last days or even weeks as the mimic builds a mental map of its hunting ground. It pays particular attention to lighting conditions, noting where torches burn and where shadows gather, understanding that darkness favors its ambush tactics. During this scouting period, the mimic also studies the competition. Dungeons rarely house only one predator, and a mimic must account for other monsters that might threaten it or compete for prey. It identifies the territories of neighboring creatures, learns their feeding schedules and movement patterns, and selects a hunting location that minimizes dangerous encounters. A mimic would rather avoid confrontation with a basilisk or a group of ghouls, preferring to position itself where it can feed without interference. This awareness of its place in the dungeon ecosystem demonstrates intelligence that pure instinct cannot explain. Once the mimic selects a location, it commits to that space with remarkable dedication. Mimics are ambush predators rather than active hunters, a strategy that requires them to remain stationary for extended periods. They do not roam looking for prey, but instead transform into objects and wait for prey to come to them. This approach demands extraordinary patience, the ability to remain perfectly still and silent for days or weeks without movement. Most creatures would grow restless, would fidget or shift position, would give themselves away through small, unconscious movements. Mimics possess no such weakness. When they commit to a disguise, they become as still as the objects they imitate, breathing so slowly that even detection spells might miss them. The chosen location itself reveals the mimic's understanding of psychology. They favor rooms that create a false sense of security, spaces where adventurers lower their guard after surviving more obvious dangers. You might fight through a corridor of traps, defeat a group of undead guardians, and then enter a quiet chamber that appears empty except for a single treasure chest against the far wall. Your relief at finding something valuable after all that danger overrides your caution. Based on what we know about predator behavior, the mimic understands this psychological pattern, knows that tired, wounded adventurers who have just survived combat will be less vigilant about checking treasure. It positions itself to exploit this moment of weakness, becoming the reward that follows danger rather than the danger itself. Mimics also demonstrate awareness of party dynamics and role specialization. They observe how groups of adventurers operate, noting which member typically checks for traps, who opens doors, who handles treasure. An intelligent mimic might deliberately target the party's trap finder or lockpick specialist, understanding that these individuals often work alone while their companions stand back. The mimic disguises itself as a chest or door, waits for the rogue to approach solo, and strikes when the victim is isolated from support. By the time the rest of the party reacts, their companion is already stuck fast to the adhesive, being crushed by pseudopods and dissolved by acid. The moment of attack itself is precisely timed. A mimic does not strike the instant you touch it, despite what you might expect. It waits a fraction of a second, allowing the adhesive to spread across your skin and grip firmly before revealing its true nature. This delay ensures maximum contact area, making escape far more difficult. Your hand presses against the chest lid, the sticky substance coating your palm and fingers. You feel the wrongness immediately, that tacky resistance that should not exist on wood or metal. You try to pull back, but in that split second, the adhesive has already bonded to your skin. The chest lid opens, not upward as you intended, but outward and around, wrapping toward your arm as pseudopods erupt from the chest's body. The initial strike focuses on immobilization rather than damage. A mimic's first priority is preventing escape, ensuring that its prey cannot flee before the feeding process completes. It uses pseudopods to grapple additional limbs, spreading adhesive across as much of your body as possible. If you are holding a weapon, The mimic often targets that arm first, neutralizing your ability to fight back effectively. If you try to cast a spell, pseudopods wrap around your hands or cover your mouth, disrupting the somatic and verbal components necessary for magic. Every action the mimic takes in these opening seconds aims to transform you from a dangerous opponent into helpless prey. Sound discipline represents another crucial element of mimic hunting strategy. An isolated victim can be consumed quietly, giving the mimic time to feed completely before anyone realizes something has gone wrong. But if the victim screams, or if the sounds of struggle carry to the victim's companions, the mimic faces a much more dangerous situation. Based on their intelligence, intelligent mimics understand this dynamic and adjust their tactics accordingly. They might use a pseudopod to cover the victim's mouth immediately, muffling cries for help. Or they might strike with such sudden, overwhelming force that the victim has no opportunity to scream before losing consciousness. Speed and silence work together, the mimic killing quickly to minimize noise and risk. When facing multiple opponents, mimics employ different tactics entirely. They cannot reliably defeat an entire adventuring party through direct combat, especially if that party includes experienced warriors and spellcasters. Instead, the mimic focuses on securing at least one kill before retreating or dying. It strikes the closest or most vulnerable target, using all its attacks and abilities to kill that individual as quickly as possible, even if the party responds immediately. Even if they begin attacking the mimic, it maintains its grip on the first victim, crushing and dissolving flesh with single-minded determination. The mimic's reasoning could be pragmatic. It will likely die in this fight, but at least it will feed one last time before the end. This willingness to trade its life for a meal reveals much about mimic psychology. They possess powerful survival instincts and generally avoid fights they cannot win. But when hunger grows strong enough, when starvation becomes imminent, even intelligent mimics will take desperate risks. A starving mimic operates under different calculations than a well-fed one. It no longer weighs long-term survival against short-term feeding opportunity, but instead focuses entirely on the immediate need to eat. This desperation makes weakened mimics more dangerous in some ways, more willing to attack armed parties or reveal themselves prematurely if it means any chance at food. The feeding process itself progresses through distinct phases. Once the victim is secured and killing begins in earnest, the mimic's bite attack inflicts terrible damage through both mechanical force and chemical dissolution. The teeth tear flesh, while the acid immediately starts breaking down tissue at a molecular level. This dual action approach serves multiple purposes. The tearing action opens wounds and increases surface area for acid contact. The acid weakens muscle and connective tissue, making it easier for the teeth to tear deeper. The two effects synergize, each making the other more effective, creating a destructive process that kills most humanoids within seconds. After death, the nature of feeding changes. The mimic no longer needs to bite and tear aggressively because the prey cannot escape. Instead, it secretes additional acid, coating the corpse and allowing the digestive enzymes to work thoroughly. The mimic might partially or fully envelop the body, wrapping its amorphous mass around the dead flesh to maximize acid contact. Over hours or days, depending on the size of the meal, the acid breaks down everything: skin, muscle, bone, hair, clothing, leather armor, and even some metal items. The mimic absorbs the resulting nutrient slurry directly through its skin, a process that requires no mouth or digestive tract in the traditional sense. Certain materials resist this dissolution process. Gemstones, particularly hard stones like diamonds and rubies, pass through a mimic's digestive system unchanged. Certain magical items prove equally indigestible. Protected by enchantments that resist acid, or simply constructed from materials a mimic cannot break down. These indigestible remnants accumulate inside the mimic's body, sometimes visible as lumps or irregularities in its surface when in natural form. Based on what we know about their long lifespans, an old mimic that has fed on many adventurers over decades might carry dozens of gems and magical trinkets within its mass. Prizes that will only be recovered if someone kills the creature and cuts it open. The waste products of mimic digestion present interesting questions that scholars debate. Some researchers claim mimics produce no waste at all, converting consumed matter entirely into body mass and energy with perfect efficiency. Others argue that mimics must excrete something, perhaps leaving behind trace residues or mineral deposits that mark their long-term lairs. The truth likely falls somewhere between these extremes, with mimics being highly efficient consumers that produce minimal waste, but not zero. The lack of obvious mimic droppings or refuse certainly aids their hunting, as they leave no telltale signs of their presence except for the disappearance of their victims. Territorial behavior in mimics varies significantly based on intelligence and environmental factors. Less intelligent specimens show only rudimentary territorial instincts, defending their chosen hunting location against other mimics, but showing no concern for other monster species. The territory exists simply as a feeding ground, a place the mimic has claimed because prey appears there regularly. If prey stops coming, or if a more dangerous predator moves in, the mimic abandons the territory without hesitation, seeking better hunting grounds elsewhere. Intelligent mimics demonstrate more complex territorial behavior. They recognize that their hunting location represents a valuable resource worth defending, not just from other mimics, but from anything that might disrupt the prey flow. This could suggest an intelligent mimic might negotiate with other dungeon inhabitants, establishing informal boundaries and non-aggression pacts that benefit all parties. A mimic might allow goblins to pass through its chamber unmolested because the goblin's presence elsewhere in the dungeon attracts adventurers. The adventurers come seeking goblin treasure, and some of them pass through the mimic's territory on their way deeper into the complex. Attacking the goblins would eliminate this steady prey supply, so the mimic tolerates them, recognizing their value as bait. Some mimics develop relationships with dungeon masters or other intelligent evil creatures who control entire complexes. A lich or dragon might deliberately place mimics in specific locations as guardians, feeding them regularly enough to ensure loyalty and providing protection from adventurers strong enough to threaten the mimics. In exchange, the mimics serve as living traps, eliminating intruders and protecting treasure hoards. These arrangements benefit both parties. The dungeon master gains reliable guardians who need no magical compulsion, while the mimics receive steady meals without the risks of active hunting. The question of mimic reproduction remains somewhat mysterious. Mimics do reproduce, as evidenced by their continued existence across centuries, but the specifics of their reproductive cycle are not well documented in canonical sources. Based on the fact that mimics spread and propagate, they must have some method of reproduction, though whether this occurs through biological means, magical division, or some other process remains largely speculative. What we can infer is that young mimics exist and must learn hunting strategies through trial and error, suggesting a growth and maturation process that takes years. Section 4. Mimics throughout history and legend. Surviving an encounter with a mimic requires understanding how to detect them before they strike, how to fight them if detection fails, and most importantly, how to recognize the signs that separate a genuine object from a hungry predator. You cannot eliminate risk entirely, not in a world where mimics exist, but knowledge and caution can shift the odds in your favor. Detection remains the first and most critical defense against mimics. Several methods exist, each with its own strengths and limitations. Careful observation represents the most accessible approach, available to any adventurer regardless of magical ability. Based on what we know about their physical limitations, mimics cannot perfectly replicate every detail of the objects they imitate. An experienced observer might notice weight inconsistencies, a chest that seems too heavy or too light for its apparent construction. Surface temperature provides another clue, as living flesh maintains warmth that stone or metal should not possess. The faint smell of acid sometimes betrays a mimic's presence, a chemical tang in the air that suggests digestive processes rather than inert matter. Positional oddities offer additional warning signs. A treasure chest sitting alone in the center of an empty room, perfectly positioned to catch attention, should trigger suspicion. Real containers typically rest against walls or in corners, placed there deliberately by inhabitants who needed storage space. A door that appears newer or cleaner than surrounding architecture might not be a door at all, but rather a mimic taking advantage of high traffic areas. These contextual clues require thinking like a dungeon designer, asking yourself whether an object makes sense in its location, or whether it appears staged to attract prey. Physical testing from a safe distance represents the prudent adventurer's standard practice. The famous 10-foot pole exists specifically for this purpose, allowing you to prod suspicious objects without coming within grappling range. An arrow shot from across the room serves similar functions, revealing whether that chest or statue will react to impact. Some adventurers carry small stones or other throwable objects, tossing them at suspicious surfaces to test for adhesive properties. If the thrown object sticks when it should bounce or fall away, you have likely found your mimic without touching it yourself. Magical detection offers more reliable but resource-intensive options. The Detect Magic spell reveals magical auras, though this creates complications with mimics. A mimic's shape-shifting ability is not itself magical, but rather a natural biological function, meaning Detect Magic will not reveal the creature directly. However, if the mimic is pretending to be a magical object, the absence of an expected magical aura becomes suspicious. Similarly, if you detect magic where none should exist, this could indicate a mimic has consumed magical items that remain within its body, their enchantments still radiating through the creature's flesh. The Detect Thoughts spell provides more consistent results, as mimics possess sufficient intelligence to register on the spell's mental radar. A treasure chest that thinks represents an obvious threat, though intelligent mimics might recognize when someone is probing for thoughts and attempt to shield their minds or remain mentally quiet. True seeing cuts through all deception, revealing mimics in their natural forms regardless of their disguises. This high-level magic remains beyond most adventurers' reach, but those who can cast it gain near-perfect security against mimic ambushes. Cantrips offer creative solutions for magically inclined adventurers operating on limited resources. The Prestidigitation cantrip only affects non-living matter, making it a simple test for suspected mimics. If you attempt to change an object's color and nothing happens, the object is likely alive and therefore potentially dangerous. Creature targeting spells like Sacred Flame can serve similar purposes, though some debate exists about whether you can target what appears to be an object with such magic. The uncertainty makes this approach less reliable than physical or purely detection-based methods. Combat with mimics requires different tactics than fighting most monsters. Their adhesive creates immediate problems, grappling you at the moment of contact and making escape difficult. Breaking free demands considerable strength, and multiple escape attempts face increasingly poor odds as the adhesive bonds more firmly. This means your first priority when a companion gets stuck is not necessarily attacking the mimic, but rather helping break the adhesive bond. Pulling your stuck companion requires coordination. Multiple people applying force simultaneously, while the victim also attempts to break free. Fire and extreme cold represent the mimic's primary environmental vulnerabilities. Intense heat can limit their shape-shifting abilities and cause significant damage to their amorphous bodies. Alchemical fire, burning oil, or fire-based spells all prove highly effective against mimics. Cold works similarly, though through different mechanisms, freezing the creature's naturally fluid tissues and making movement difficult. Adventuring parties that carry flasks of oil or alchemical substances find themselves well equipped for mimic encounters, able to engulf the creature in flames and force it to release grappled victims or die. The mimic's reliance on surprise means that once detected, its advantages diminish considerably. A revealed mimic must fight as the predator it is, using pseudopods and bite attacks against prepared opponents. These attacks carry real danger through bludgeoning force and acid damage, but they lack the overwhelming advantage of ambush combined with adhesive grappling. Based on what we know about their tactics, mimics that realize they have been discovered before striking often choose to flee rather than fight, especially if they face multiple armed opponents. They would rather retreat to hunt another day than die in combat that offers no feeding opportunity. Ranged combat favors defenders significantly once a mimic reveals itself. The creature possesses limited ranged capabilities, relying primarily on closing distance to employ its adhesive and bite. Archers and spellcasters can maintain safe distance while inflicting damage, forcing the mimic to either advance into continued fire or attempt escape. This dynamic makes group composition matter considerably in mimic-heavy environments. Parties consisting entirely of melee fighters face much greater danger than balanced groups with ranged damage dealers. The most dangerous mimic encounter occurs when the creature successfully grapples one party member. The mimic positions its victim as a shield, placing the captured body between itself and attackers. Ranged attacks risk hitting your companion instead of the mimic. Area effect spells might kill both victim and predator together. This tactical situation forces terrible choices. Do you risk friendly fire to kill the mimic quickly before it finishes consuming your companion? Or do you attempt more precise attacks that take longer and might arrive too late? There exist no good answers, only calculated risks and desperate hopes. Certain locations throughout the realms developed reputations related to mimics, though separating verified history from legend proves challenging. Undermountain, the massive dungeon complex beneath Waterdeep, certainly hosts mimic populations across its many levels. The dungeon's creator, the mad archmage Halaster Blackcloak, has survived for over 1,000 years through powerful magic and numerous clones. The dungeon itself has become a legendary testing ground for adventurers, filled with countless dangers and strange magical phenomena. This could imply that Hallister's experiments might have included work with various creatures, though specific details about mimic breeding programs lack solid documentation in historical texts. The ruins of Myth Drannor, the fallen elven city, contain their own dangers and mysteries. Once a beacon of magical civilization where multiple races coexisted in harmony, Myth Drannor fell to great evil centuries ago, leaving it despoiled and haunted. The ruins are known for wild magic that permeates the area and the deadly dangers that fill the abandoned city. Based on the unstable magical environment, it's reasonable to infer that creatures dwelling there, including any mimics, might show unusual behaviors or adaptations influenced by the magical saturation. Historical documentation of specific mimic encounters remains surprisingly sparse in verified sources. The earliest documented mimic encounter appears in fragmentary text recovered from the ruins of Mithraor, described by an elven ranger whose name has been lost to time. She entered what she thought was a dragon's hoard chamber, only to discover that the treasure itself had grown teeth and hungered. 7 companions died in that encounter, and she survived only by setting the entire room ablaze and fleeing through the flames. This account stands as one of the few verified early descriptions of mimic predation, though even its details have likely been embellished through retellings over centuries. The psychological impact of living in a world inhabited by mimics extends far beyond simple caution about treasure chests. Chronic adventurers can develop what healers call object paranoia, a condition where the sufferer becomes incapable of trusting any inanimate object. They prod and poke everything obsessively, refusing to sit in chairs, open doors barehanded, or touch containers without extensive testing. In severe cases, the paranoia extends to their own possessions, with victims constantly checking their backpacks and equipment to ensure nothing has been replaced by a mimic. While this hypervigilance might seem excessive to those who have never encountered a mimic, experienced adventurers recognize it as a rational response to a genuine threat. This pervasive distrust reshapes adventuring party dynamics in subtle but significant ways. Members constantly watch each other interact with objects, ready to respond if something suddenly attacks. The simple act of opening a chest becomes a group activity, with warriors standing ready to strike and spellcasters preparing combat magic, while the designated trap finder approaches the container. This coordination is necessary, but it slows exploration dramatically and exhausts party resources. Every door, every piece of furniture, every seemingly innocuous object requires the same careful approach, turning dungeon delving into an exhausting marathon of constant vigilance. Some adventurers develop elaborate personal rituals for dealing with potential mimics, Practices that border on superstition but provide psychological comfort. They might always approach containers from the left side or tap 3 times before opening anything, or recite specific prayers to protective deities. These rituals have no actual effect on mimic behavior, but they give the practitioner a sense of control in situations where control is largely illusory. You can do everything right, take every precaution, and still fall victim to a sufficiently clever mimic. The randomness of it creates anxiety that rituals help manage, even if the management is purely psychological. Cultural responses to mimics vary significantly between different societies and regions. In Waterdeep and other cosmopolitan cities, mimics are treated as a known hazard, dangerous, but manageable like any other monster. City guards receive training in mimic identification and response, and professional monster hunters advertise mimic removal services. Rural communities often view mimics with more superstitious dread, telling stories that exaggerate the creature's abilities and intelligence. Some villages develop folk beliefs about mimics, claiming they can read minds, sense fear, or appear in dreams to torment future victims. These beliefs lack factual basis, but they reflect the deep psychological impact these predators have on communities that encounter them. Artistic depictions of mimics appear throughout the realms, from tavern warning signs to theatrical productions. The image of the treasure chest with teeth has become iconic, a universal symbol for hidden danger and betrayed expectations. Playwrights use mimics as metaphors for deception and greed, writing morality tales about foolish adventurers whose avarice leads them to ignore warning signs. These stories always end the same way. The greedy character reaches for treasure despite obvious danger and gets consumed by the mimic, while wise characters who resisted temptation survive. The moral is heavy-handed but effective, teaching audiences that caution and wisdom matter more than gold. Section 5. Unsolved Mysteries and Dark Theories. Despite centuries of study and countless encounters, mimics remain fundamentally mysterious creatures whose true nature eludes complete understanding. You have learned their anatomy, their tactics, their history, but beneath these practical details lie questions that no scholar has answered satisfactorily. The deeper you examine mimic lore, the more you realize how much remains unknown. How many contradictions exist in the established literature? How many disturbing implications lurk at the edges of what researchers dare to acknowledge? The question of mimic reproduction stands as one of the most significant unresolved issues. Scholars agree that mimics must reproduce somehow, as their populations remain stable or even grow across multiple regions. Yet the documentation of mimic reproductive behavior remains limited in canonical sources. According to some accounts, mimics reproduce through a process called budding. When a mimic has consumed sufficient prey and feels secure in its territory, it enters a reproductive phase. A bulge forms on the mimic's body, growing over several weeks into what develops its own primitive consciousness. Eventually, this growth separates from the parent, creating a new, independent mimic. This process explains why no one has observed traditional mating behavior, though it raises additional questions about genetic diversity and evolutionary adaptation. The existence of distinct mimic variants adds another layer to the reproductive mystery. Historical sources document at least two major subspecies: killer mimics and common mimics. Killer mimics represent a larger, more aggressive, and less intelligent variant. These creatures attack instinctively, showing little capacity for communication or negotiation. They can achieve dimensions up to 12 feet in size and demonstrate purely predatory behavior without the cunning calculations seen in their smaller cousins. Common mimics, the variety most frequently encountered and discussed throughout this exploration, possess greater intelligence and the capacity for language. They can negotiate, bargain, and engage in complex tactical thinking. The relationship between these variants remains unclear. This could suggest they represent different evolutionary branches from a common ancestor, different stages in a life cycle, or perhaps different responses to environmental pressures that shaped mimic populations in various regions. The cosmic implications of mimic existence extend beyond questions of biology or behavior into the realm of metaphysics. What does the existence of mimics tell us about the nature of reality itself? If creatures can exist that challenge fundamental assumptions about shape, identity, and the boundary between living and unliving matter, what other impossible things might be real? Mimics demonstrate that appearance and reality can diverge so completely that even careful observation fails to reveal truth. They prove that trust in one's perceptions can be deadly, that the world contains threats that exploit the very cognitive processes we use to navigate existence. The handful of documented cases where mimics showed genuine altruism or self-sacrifice remain deeply puzzling. The story of Chompy stands as the most famous example, though whether this represented true affection or simply a mimic's instinct to protect a reliable food source remains debatable. Several other accounts describe mimics acting against their apparent self-interest to help creatures they had no obvious reason to help. One report tells of a mimic that guided lost adventurers to safety through a dangerous dungeon section, refusing payment and simply returning to its hunting ground after ensuring the party reached a safe exit. Another describes a mimic that attacked and killed a group of slavers who were transporting prisoners through its territory, freeing the captives, and then disappearing without attempting to feed on either the slavers or the freed slaves. These incidents are rare enough that they might be misidentifications, exaggerations, or outright fabrications. But if even one such story is true, it suggests mimics possess moral reasoning capacity that standard predator models cannot explain. You might wonder, after learning all this, whether mimics are truly evil or simply creatures following their nature. This question has no easy answer. A mimic must feed to survive, and feeding requires killing. From the mimic's perspective, hunting intelligent prey might be no different than a wolf hunting deer or a spider catching flies. The prey's intelligence and capacity for suffering do not enter the equation, because the mimic needs sustenance regardless of ethical considerations. But mimics also show calculation, deliberate deception, and willingness to inflict suffering beyond what efficient killing requires. They do not simply kill and feed, but rather toy with prey, exploit trust, and sometimes appear to take satisfaction in successful deception beyond the practical benefit it provides. This could imply cruelty, intentional malice, qualities that move beyond mere predation into genuine evil. The evolutionary future of mimics concerns researchers who study long-term monster trends. Mimics already show remarkable adaptability, adjusting their tactics and preferred forms to match changing environments. As civilization expands and technology advances, mimics adapt to urban and industrial settings, developing new hunting strategies that exploit modern contexts. This adaptability suggests mimics will not only survive, but potentially thrive as the world changes around them. Based on their demonstrated learning capacity, future mimics might develop resistances to detection spells, evolve defenses against common weapons, or even learn to mimic magical items so effectively that even careful inspection cannot reveal the deception. The nightmare scenario involves mimics developing hive intelligence or coordinated behavior on a large scale. Old lore suggests that when enough mimics gather in a single area, they develop a form of telepathy between them. Currently, mimic cooperation remains rare and opportunistic, limited to pairs or small groups working together briefly. But if mimics evolved the capacity for organized social structures, if they began communicating and coordinating across distances, their threat level would increase exponentially. A dungeon inhabited by dozens of mimics working together with shared intelligence and coordinated tactics would be nearly impossible to navigate safely. This remains largely theoretical, though the existence of telepathic communication hints at untapped potential for collective intelligence. The intelligence variance among mimics presents its own mysteries. Common mimics demonstrate intelligence below average human levels, while greater mimics can possess wisdom and cunning that rivals or exceeds human genius. What determines which mimics develop greater intelligence and which remain relatively simple? Age seems like the obvious answer, with older mimics having more time to learn and grow mentally. But some ancient mimics remain stubbornly unintelligent, while occasional young specimens show remarkable cognitive abilities from the start. This pattern suggests that intelligence might be an inherent trait rather than something developed through experience. or that specific environmental conditions trigger intellectual development in ways researchers have not yet identified. The possibility of truly sapient mimics, creatures with self-awareness, and complex inner lives comparable to humanoid consciousness, raises profound ethical questions. If a mimic can think, feel, and reason at human levels, does killing it constitute murder rather than simple monster slaying? Adventurers and monster hunters generally treat mimics as dangerous animals to be eliminated without moral qualms. But if some mimics are actually sentient beings trapped in monstrous forms, driven by biological hunger they cannot control, the ethics become much more complicated. No researcher has successfully established meaningful long-term communication with a mimic, though several have tried. The greatest obstacle is trust, the fundamental impossibility of being certain a mimic's apparent cooperation is genuine rather than elaborate deception aimed at getting close enough to feed. A mimic that speaks common and engages in conversation might be negotiating in good faith, or it might simply be using words to lower your guard before striking. Even if a mimic seems friendly and helpful, even if it provides accurate information and honors agreements, you can never fully escape the knowledge that you represent potential food to a creature whose survival depends on consumption. The question of whether mimics experience emotions beyond hunger and fear remains unanswered. Do they feel pleasure when feeding? Or is consumption purely mechanical necessity? Do they experience boredom during the long waits between prey? Or do they simply exist in a state of patient suspension? Can they feel loneliness, curiosity, or the satisfaction of successful hunting beyond the immediate relief of feeding? These questions matter because they determine whether mimics are monsters to be destroyed without hesitation or creatures deserving some measure of consideration and possibly even protection. The distribution of mimics across the world raises additional questions. These creatures appear in dungeons and ruins throughout Faerun, Buran, and other continents, occupying environments ranging from Arctic caves to tropical jungles to urban centers. This cosmopolitan distribution suggests either that mimics possess remarkable adaptability, or that they have existed for an extremely long time, long enough to spread naturally across vast distances. But if mimics are as old as their distribution implies, why do the earliest historical records only date back roughly 1,000 years? Based on what we know about their spread, either mimics avoided widespread contact for millennia before suddenly becoming common dungeon inhabitants, or something changed approximately 1,000 years ago that triggered their appearance or proliferation. Some scholars propose that mimics existed in small numbers for ages, but underwent a population explosion around 1,000 years ago due to environmental changes. The increase in dungeon delving, treasure hunting, and adventuring during that period would have provided abundant prey for mimic populations. more adventurers meant more food, and more food meant mimics could reproduce more successfully, leading to exponential population growth. This explanation seems logical, though it assumes that mimics were limited by food availability rather than other factors like reproduction rate or territorial competition. The world will never be free of mimics. They are too well adapted, too widely distributed, too successful as predators to be hunted to extinction. Adventurers will continue encountering them in dungeons, ruins, and increasingly in cities, as urban environments provide new hunting opportunities. The best you can hope for is awareness, caution, and the wisdom to recognize that sometimes treasure is not worth the risk. Every chest you see might be exactly what it appears to be: a simple container holding coins and gems, or it might be something ancient and hungry, something that has waited weeks or months for someone exactly like you to come along and make the fatal mistake of reaching for the latch. The mimic waits in darkness, patient as stone, knowing that eventually someone will touch it. It has learned that creatures like you cannot resist forever, that caution eventually gives way to fatigue or greed or simple necessity. You can prod with poles, cast detection spells, check for every warning sign taught by experience and training. But in the end, you will have to take the risk to open the door or claim the treasure or sit in the chair. And when you do, you will discover whether your caution was sufficient or whether this was the moment your luck ran out and the object you touched was alive. The mysteries remain, the questions unanswered, the theories unproven. Mimics continue lurking in the forgotten places of the world, in dungeons delved and undelved, in ruins explored and unexplored. They are patient because they have time, deadly because they have perfected their craft over generations, and ultimately unknowable because their true nature may be beyond mortal comprehension. You have learned much about them through this exploration of their lore, but the final lesson is perhaps the most important one. In a world where mimics exist, trust nothing, question everything, and remember that the greatest dangers often hide behind the most ordinary appearances. If you found this deep dive into mimic lore both enlightening and unsettling, if these whispered truths about shape-shifting predators have enhanced your appreciation for the dangers lurking in dungeon darkness, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Share your own mimic encounters and theories in the comments below. Until next time, may your treasure chests contain only treasure. May your doors remain doors, and may you always remember to check twice before trusting what your eyes tell you is real.